Okay, so today is lecture number 8 and we'll talk about transcription again. So this is the second lecture on transcription. I think I might need 2 to 3 more lectures, maybe 2 lectures on transcription more because there's a lot of things left to cover in this. So today we'll talk about the remaining parts of transcription. Not all of it, we'll talk about elongation. Sorry, and we'll talk about how it differs in eukaryotes and what are the other protein factors that are involved in transcription. So we'll talk about first consensus sequences. These are sequences found at transcription start sites and at terminator regions. Then we'll talk about the orientation of the transcripts. We'll talk about transcription in eukaryotes and how it's different. We'll talk about what are the problems that you need to deal with when you're transcribing. So one of them is supercoiling, and then we'll talk about RNA processing. This is just I'll just give you a brief idea of what RNA processing is, and we'll cover capping in a little detail, but the other two processes we'll cover in further lectures. So this is the image I wanted to show in last lecture. I forgot to add this image in the slides. So this is what I wanted to show how transcription occurs, and this is an in vitro micrograph of two genes being transcribed simultaneously. So just based on the length of these transcripts, so the DNA is at the center, the center line is DNA, and these are the RNA transcripts. So just based on these lengths, you can tell that the ones at the right end of the DNA are longer, therefore the transcription must have started here. So it starts here and it gets longer as it moves across the DNA strand. So that's what I wanted to show. And the scales we're talking about, so this much is about 1 micrometer. So 1 micrometer is 1 in 10 raised to minus 6 meters, which is, so you need about 1 million of these to make 1 meter. So just to give you an idea of the scale. Anyway, so consensus sequences. So there are certain sequences that occur in the transcription start sites at the minus 35 and minus 10 end of the transcription start site. So this is minus 10 and this is minus 35. So the minus 35 signifies that it's farther away upstream of the transcription start site, and minus 10 is a bit closer. And TTGACA is the consensus sequence at minus 35, and TATAAT is the consensus sequence at minus 10 site. And so the consensus sequence is decided based on which nucleotide is found at those regions to the greatest extent. So the yellow indicates T. Yes, the lecture is being recorded. So the yellow bars indicate thymine, green is guanine, red is cytosine, and blue is adenine. So, so based on the prevalence of each of these nucleotides, you see there's a very clear cut, like it's very clear about which nucleotide is present at the most level at each of these sites. And but it's possible to have other kinds of nucleotides present. So the first is cytosine at this position, but you can also have adenine instead of cytosine. And these variations in the consensus sequences will tell you how strong a promoter is. If it's exactly this sequence TTGACA and TATAAT, that would mean it's a very strong promoter. But if there's a little change, then it will be a little weaker promoter. And if there's a lot of changes in the consensus sequences, then it will be a very weak promoter. And these regions are what bind to your sigma factor in prokaryotes. So sigma factor binds in a DNA sequence dependent manner, and so as long as you have these sequences, it will bind. And if you have exactly this sequence, it will be a very strong promoter. So the differences in sequence can determine the strength of the promoter. We just discussed that. The promoter of the genes expressed at a higher level are stronger. So genes that are expressed more, such as housekeeping genes. So these are genes that produce proteins which are very essential for the cell survival of the cell. So these genes will have very strong promoters, and genes that are transcribed less will have weaker promoters because they don't need to be transcribed at a higher level. So the strength of a promoter is one way by which a cell can control the level of transcription of that particular gene. And terminator regions also have specific sequences. So in the last lecture, we talked about how terminator sequences, so the terminator sequences are arranged in such a manner that the RNA transcript formed makes a hairpin loop. So a hairpin loop will be formed when you have 80, 80, 80 or GC, GC, GC tandem repeats. So if you have a lot of A, T, 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 T or G, 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 C, 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 all of these, once transcribed, can form hairpin loops. And these hairpin loops are what helps in the dissociation of the RNA polymerase from the DNA template in a prokaryote. This is not what occurs in eukaryotes, talking about prokaryotes right now. So that's why you need specific sequences of repeating nucleotides, and there can be a lot of variation in this because you can like I just talked about 4 different types of sequences that you can have at the terminator regions, such as A, then TTTT or GGGG, CCCC, or AT or GC. You get my point. You can have more variation because it's a very simple sequence compared to the promoter, where you need a very particular sequence of nucleotides. Now we'll talk about transcript orientation. So if you remember, we talked about how in DNA replication, the replication occurs only in a 5' to 3' manner, and we discussed why it's only in the 5' to 3' manner. If you are new to this course or you forgot, I suggest you look at the recordings for DNA replication. It will be much clearer there. So I don't want to go into that whole thing again because that was quite a big portion. Anyway, so that's how that RNA transcript is also transcribed in a 5' to 3' manner. If the RNA polymerase is moving in the rightward direction, and this is the orientation of your parental strands, you will have a 5' to 3' growth of the RNA sequence transcribed. So therefore, the bottom strand is the template strand, and since it's G G G G G, your RNA will be C C C C C because G bears with C. And if it is moving in a left direction with this particular orientation of the parental strands, not parental, template strands, then you will have a 5' to 3' growth again. So 5' to 3'. So this is a leftward growth, and since the top strand is CCCCC, the transcript will be GGGGG. So I hope this is clear. The growth of the transcript is always in the 5' to 3' direction, and depending on how the polymerase is moving will ensure which strand it's using as a template. If it's moving in the rightward direction, then the strand, I think the image is clearer. The more I say it, the more confused it will get, the more confusing it becomes. Just look at the image. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The more words you attach to this simple concept, the more complicated it gets. Anyway, transcription is always in the 5' to 3' direction, and the template strand varies with the gene. In some genes, the bottom strand is the template strand. In some genes, the top strand is the template strand. So you can have both strands transcribing something, and usually they don't transcribe together, but in some cases, both strands can be transcribed simultaneously, or well, not simultaneously, but in an alternating fashion or whatever. So the RNA polymerase that moves left to right makes the transcript on the bottom strand, and what moves right to left makes the transcript from the top strand. So I'll pause here for questions from the previous 2 slides if you have any. Okay, no one's typing. So I think that's clear. It was a pretty simple concept. We'll come to the complicated portion further. So that was prokaryotic transcription. We haven't discussed elongation and termination yet. Well, termination in some extent we have covered, but not very very much in detail. So now we'll talk about how the initiation and elongation occurs in eukaryotes and how it's different from prokaryotes. So in prokaryotes, we talked about RNA polymerase because there's only one kind of polymerase present in eukaryotes. But in in prokaryotes, I'm sorry if I said eukaryotes, there's only one kind of RNA polymerase in prokaryotes. There are 3 kinds of polymerases, RNA polymerases in eukaryotes, and those are RNA polymerase 1, 2, and 3. And each of these polymerases transcribes a different kind of RNA. So RNA polymerase 1 transcribes the 5.8S, 18S, and 28S rRNA genes. So rRNA is ribosomal RNA. So RNA polymerase 1 is essential or the transcription of ribosomal RNA. RNA polymerase 2 is the most important polymerase that we'll talk about because it is important for all protein coding genes. So we're talking about transcription right now in the sense of protein products. So therefore, RNA polymerase 2 is the polymerase that is required for protein coding genes. It also is required for SNO RNAs, miRNAs, siRNAs, and some snRNAs. We'll talk about these different RNAs later on in further lectures. RNA polymerase 3 is important for tRNA. This is the transfer RNA, the one which brings amino acids during translation. We have the 5SR RNA, some snRNA genes. So most snRNA genes are transcribed by the polymerase 2, some are transcribed by polymerase 3, and some other small RNA. So that's irrelevant for us right now. And if you're wondering what the S stands for, so 5.8 S, 18 S, 28 S. So S refers to the Swedberg values. But the name is not given here, but it's Swedberg, Swedberg, and this indicates the level of centrifugation. The rate of sedimentation during an ultracentrifugation. So the larger the S value, the faster it sediments. So the smaller S value indicate that's the smaller RNA. So 5.8S or 5S is the smallest and 28S is the largest. So it will sediment faster. And S is for Swedberg, the guy who coined this term. Anyway, the two major differences in prokaryotic and eukaryotic transcription is that eukaryotic RNA polymerases require many additional protein factors. So we talked about the sigma factor in prokaryotes, and there are many more protein factors involved in eukaryotic transcription. And if you remember, if you're also in the epigenetics course, we have talked about how nucleosomes and chromatin can dictate the rate of transcription, and RNA polymerases have to deal with these nucleosomes and chromatin. So what are the additional protein factors? So GTF stands for general transcription factors. These are called general transcription factors because these are factors that are required for transcription of most genes. So these are proteins required for most eukaryotic transcription to occur. There are additional transcription factors that can dictate the transcription of certain genes, but that's more of cell biology and a little less of the process we're talking about right now. There are many other transcription factors which are specific, but we'll talk about only the general ones which are required for all of the transcription to occur. These are designated as TF2s. So TF means transcription factor and 2 signifies RNA polymerase 2. So TF2 means transcription factor for RNA polymerase 2. And these are TF2A, TF2B, TF2C, TF2D, many transcription factors involved. And that's how they are named. So some of them, I think TF2H resembles the sigma factor a lot. So the activity of these transcription factors is very similar to the sigma factor that we've talked about earlier. It recognizes DNA sequences and attracts RNA polymerase to it. And we talked about the consensus sequence in prokaryotes. So the consensus sequence in prokaryotes is TTGSCA and T8TAAT. But in eukaryotes, it is a Tata box. A Tata box refers to tandem repeats of TA and T. AT repeats is known as Tata box, and this is 25 nucleotides upstream of the transcription start site. So if this is the start of transcription, this is 25 nucleotides upstream, the Tata box. And Tata box is what the transcription factors bind to initially. So the first transcription factor to bind is TF2D. TF2D has a TBP. So TBP is a Tata binding protein. And this Tata binding protein helps the TF2D to bind to the Tata box. So once this is bound, you have other transcription factors coming in. So TF2B comes in, and then you have TF2E, TF2H, and all of these are involved in attracting the RNA polymerase to bind to it. So once the RNA polymerase is bound, you have certain conformational changes in the RNA polymerase, which allow it to continue elongation. So you need helicase activity to unwind the double-stranded DNA for this to occur. You need phosphorylation of CTD. CTD stands for C-terminal domain. So this long chain you see, that's a C-terminal domain, and this is very important for RNA processing. We'll come to that later. And then you have the addition of UTP, ATP, CTP, GTP. These indicate the ribonucleotides which are being added. And then once elongation starts, you have the disassembly of the GTFs. So once elongation has started, all of these proteins can disassemble and leave and wait for some other RNA polymerase to attract. So once this RNA polymerase starts moving forward, starts elongating, they can dissociate and reassociate with this same Tata box to attract another RNA polymerase. So you can have multiple RNA polymerases acting together on the same gene. Just like this image, you have multiple rounds of transcription occurring at the same time, and that's how it occurs. So the Tata box is found 25 nucleotides at upstream of the transcription start site, and this whole thing, the complex formed with all the transcription factors, the RNA polymerase, is known as the transcription initiation complex. So this is what's required to initiate the transcription machinery to begin its function. And there are conformational changes involved in moving from initiation to the elongation phase. And one of these conformational changes is the phosphorylation of CTD. I showed you the tail, the C-terminal domain is a tail of the RNA polymerase 2. And once it's ready to start elongating, this tail is phosphorylated. And this phosphorylation is super important. We'll come to that in further slides when we talk about RNA processing. But I'll stop here to take questions and get a sip of water. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Okay, some second. Does the RNA polymerase require helicase or can it open the DNA on its own? The prokaryotic RNA polymerase does not require a helicase, but we do have the requirement of helicase in eukaryotic transcription. Anyway, so this is what happens. So this is the TF2D, sorry. The TF2D is what first binds to the Tata box, and this entire thing is the TF2D. And TF2D is one long, so that this particular TBP, so you remember TBP here, TBP is one domain of the TF2D. So there's a TF2D entire complex, sorry, not a complex, the TF2D big protein, and then you have a domain called TBP inside that protein. And this is the TBP domain, the Tata binding protein. And it's one chain which forms two identical domains. So it's one continuous chain, there's no break here. It's one chain forming two domains. And what this does, so this is the Tata box, TATA, repeats of TAAA and T. So what it does is it recognizes the Tata box, it binds to it, and it creates a double-stranded kink in the DNA. So you see there's a bend in the DNA which occurs. And this, so they theorize that this bend is required for the recruitment of every other transcription factor involved in the initiation of transcription. Anyway, so what are these general transcription factors? So these are most of the general factors, and you can read their roles in transcription initiation. So the TF2D was the first one, having a TBP subunit, which was the Tata binding protein that recognizes the Tata box. And then you have so many more transcription factors, and they have so many more functions, which once you start discussing the functions, there'll be a lot of confusion. So I suggest you read the textbook for this. But the textbook also does not does not elaborate on their functions exactly in these pages at least. So this is not really a material for an intro level course, so we'll skip that. And if you want to read more about them, you definitely can. So what are the other factors that are required to start transcription? You have activator proteins and mediator proteins. So some genes require activator proteins which bind to enhancer sites. So enhancer sites are sites for activator proteins. So activator proteins are binding to these enhancer sites, and what happens is a mediator protein can bind to the activator and the initiation complex. So this whole thing was the initiation complex. This purple mediator and blue activator are new things, and these can be involved in the development of the transcription initiation complex. So that's about it. So there are a few more factors involved, and this is a very basic function of them. And then you have histone modifying enzymes which can remove histone. So we know how the eukaryotic chromosome has nucleosomes and stuff like that. So what histone modifying enzymes can do is they can dissociate the subunits of the histone complex, the octamer histone. They can dissociate some subunits and allow transcription to occur. What chromatin remodeling complex can do is move the nucleosomes away and open up DNA to allow transcription, right? So this is discussed much more in detail in the epigenetics course. I won't get into that right now. So what happens? So one problem that occurs during transcription is supercoiling, and we discussed supercoiling in DNA replication, and we talked about how topoisomerases are important to relieve supercoiling. So what happens if you imagine a DNA with one fixed end and one free end? Once you have opening of DNA, you'll need to keep rotating the DNA further on to relieve the coiling. So imagine you have two strings and you start pulling them apart from one end. You can imagine how this end would start rotating, right? But what happens is we don't have DNA with a free end. We have DNA with fixed ends, and these fixed ends, say in prokaryotes, you have a circular DNA, so you have fixed ends. In eukaryotes, you have nucleosomes, you have really long stretches of DNA. Therefore, you can imagine such a tightly packed structure to have DNA with a fixed end. This is just a very easy way to depict what happens. So you just assume our DNA resembles a DNA with two fixed ends, and once you start unwinding the DNA, instead of simply rotating like it could in a free end, what happens is that it forms supercoils. And I think I've attached a video in one of the previous lecture on how supercoils are formed and how supercoils are relieved. So you can refer to those videos again. It's the same concept here. And that's what happens when you have a protein molecule, the transcription machinery moving forward. You will have formation of positive supercoils and negative supercoils at the back. So positive supercoils prevent opening of DNA and negative supercoils allow the opening of DNA. So we'll talk about why that's important. So transcription can create superhelical tension that must be resolved. So before that, sorry, there are elongation factors. We talked about initiation and transcription factors. Now there are elongation factors which are associated with the RNA polymerase that ensures that the RNA polymerase does not dissociate during transcription. So that does not happen, and elongation factors ensure that. So transcription machinery can create superhelical tension that is resolved through supercoiling. And to resolve this supercoiling, now you need DNA topoisomerases. So we've discussed topoisomerases in DNA replication. And prokaryotes use a specialized topoisomerase known as a DNA gyrase. So what a regular topoisomerase does is it relieves these supercoils. That's what it does. What a DNA gyrase, so DNA gyrase is in prokaryotes, and what this does is that it injects negative supercoils before transcription, before the transcription machinery has reached. See, imagine there are no supercoils right now. So imagine this is a very straight DNA. and transcription has just begun. So right now there are no supercoils. So what DNA gyrase will go and do is that it will move ahead of the transcription machinery and cause negative supercoils. It will form not two, multiple negative supercoils. So here it says that negative supercoiling, it facilitates helix opening. So if you introduce negative supercoils ahead of the transcription machinery, that would mean that once the superhelical tension is starting to be built up, these negative supercoils will just open up into regular straight DNA. I hope I'm making sense here. So what happens if you have nothing going on in front of the DNA? You have positive supercoiling. Positive supercoiling is bad. It stops your opening of DNA. But negative supercoiling allows opening of DNA because it's rotating in the opposite direction. And when you open a DNA along a negative supercoil, this will just straighten out. I hope I'm making sense. I'll just pause for questions because this is a very confusing concept. Okay, I don't think anyone has questions on this. So basically, you have negative supercoils being introduced by a DNA gyrase, and these negative supercoils allow the superhelical tension to be relieved. If you had no DNA gyrase, you would have positive supercoiling, and positive supercoiling stops opening of DNA strands. But if beforehand, if you're prepared and if you introduce negative coils, so when you're starting to open up DNA, these negative coils can take up the extra superhelical tension and resolve themselves. So that's a way to resolve extra tension. And DNA gyrase maintains almost one stable level of superhelical tension. DNA gyrase calls it in the opposite side so that when the function happens, the effect is nullified. Exactly that. It is a negative supercoil. So when you have superhelical tension being built up, it just releases itself. Okay, so then we'll talk about, oh no, people are typing. I'll just pause. What causes the negative supercoiling to allow transcription? How is it different from positive supercoiling? So technically the negative and positive supercoiling both are causing superhelical tension. So both of them are technically bad. But what happens is a negative supercoil is in the opposite direction. So when you start opening DNA, it starts relieving itself into a regular straight strand. So imagine you have a positive supercoiling is giving you plus 5 units of tension. A negative supercoiling will give you minus 5 units of tension. So both of them are giving 5 units of tension, but on opposite sides. So positive is plus 5 and negative is minus 5. So imagine that opening of DNA requires you to have positive 5 supercoiling. So positive, once you have DNA opening taking place, if there's nothing, if it's just a straight strand, and you have right now the supercoiling is 0, the super helical tension, the tension units are 0 right now. Once you have transcription starting and you allow it to occur for a while, once it's done, you have positive 5 units of superhelical tension, and these positive 5 units will show up as positive supercoils. But now imagine if before transcription started, you introduced a negative supercoil of minus 5 units. So you're starting with minus 5. And once transcription begins, You add plus 5, and minus 5 plus 5 units of tension will give you 0 units of tension. So that's how DNA gyrase maintains a stable level of superhelical tension. Is the mechanism complicated? Yeah, the mechanism is quite complicated. I mean, not complicated, just not at an introductory level. We might, if you want, I think I can find some videos about it. So that's the mechanism is clear. Anyway, now we'll talk about RNA processing. So in prokaryotes, it's a very straightforward process. You have multiple genes being transcribed together. You form one long mRNA molecule, and this mRNA molecule can give multiple proteins. So you have so this long mRNA molecule is giving you multiple protein products, and this is known as a polycistronic RNA. But in eukaryotes, you have monocistronic RNA, which means that a eukaryotic mRNA will give rise to only one protein. But there can be variations in this process with if you change the splicing of the gene of the mRNA, but splicing we'll talk about in the next lecture. Splicing is a very interesting concept which we'll talk about later on because I don't want to overload information right now. So what happens in eukaryotes? So prokaryotes is a very simple process. Once you have the RNA, mRNA sequence transcribed, you immediately translate it into proteins. But in eukaryotic mRNA requires some processing to occur because, so first of all, in eukaryotes, the transcription is occurring in the nucleus because your DNA, your chromosomes are in the nucleus. And once the transcription is done, once you are done with transcription, you have the mRNA product. You modify that, you do 5' capping and 3' tailing. And then what you do is and then splicing as well. So once you do these three things, you can send it to the cytoplasm. And in cytoplasm, cytoplasm is the place where translation occurs. Prokaryotes have no nucleus and cytoplasm. The entire cell is more or less one structure, and you can very well say that prokaryotes don't have organelles, but technically they do have organelles. But that's very fringe level science. Let's not go into that. I just keep going off on tangents. Anyway, you have the 5' capping and 3' tailing, polyadenylate tailing occurring in eukaryotes. So this is a 5' gap and this is a polyadenylate trail. A polyadenylate means poly A tail. You have a lot of A 150 to 250 times. And this is your tail, and a cap is a methylated guanosine. And the CTD phosphorylation, if you remember, I'll just go back. Yeah, so this CTD, the C-terminal domain, I talked about how the C-terminal domain phosphorylation was important for RNA processing, and we'll see how. So CTD phosphorylation is essential for capping and tailing. So what happens in capping? So we'll talk about capping today. The phosphatase, so there are three steps to capping. So there's a phosphatase enzyme that removes the phosphate from the 5' end of the RNA. Then you have a guanyl transferase that adds the GMP in a reverse linkage, 5' to 5' linkage. We have discussed how only 5' to 3' linkage can occur, but the guanyl transferase adds a reverse linkage. So this linkage you see right here. So since this is the 3' end, this is the 5' end, and this is also the 5' end of the guanine. So you have 5' to 5' binding because of the guanyl transferase. And then a methyl transferase. So this CH3, this methyl group, is added by the third enzyme, the methyl transferase. The capping of mRNA helps the cell to differentiate between mRNA and other forms of RNA. So we discussed how there are three forms of RNA polymerases: RNA polymerase 1, RNA polymerase 2, and RNA polymerase 3. And these three kinds of polymerases produce different transcription products. But RNA polymerase 2 is the only one which forms mRNA transcripts. And mRNA is the only is the only kind of RNA that can translate into proteins. There are other kinds of RNA which do not give you proteins. There's a non-coding RNA. mRNA is the only coding RNA, and the RNA polymerase 2 is the only polymerase that forms mRNA. So RNA polymerase 2 forms mRNA, mRNA forms protein. And that's how the cell knows what is an mRNA, by the capping and tailing, because RNA polymerase 1 and 3 do not cap their transcripts. Only polymerase 2 caps and tails its transcripts. So how that happens is, so once you have phosphorylation of the CTD, the C-terminal domain, during elongation, you have capping factors that bind to the phosphorylation. So I think it is 52 tandem repeat. So okay, the CTD, the C-terminal domain, is a repeat of 7 amino acids. So it's a sequence of 7 amino acids that repeats itself 52 times. The numbers are not relevant to us. So I'm just telling you for your knowledge that there are 7 amino acids that are repeating 52 times, and it has 2 serines. I hope everyone here knows that serine is an amino acid, and serine can be found at 2 places in this repeat, at position number 2 and position number 5. So initially serine 5 is phosphorylated. So serine 5 is phosphorylated in the repeats, and you have the capping factors which bind to this phosphorylated serine. And then what happens is, as soon as the RNA transcript starts coming out of the polymerase, the capping factors bind to it and make the 5' cap. They allow other enzymes to come in. They allow these 3 enzymes, phosphatase, guanyl transferase, and methyl transferase, to come in and make the 5' cap. And then what eventually happens is, you have the phosphorylation of the second serine, the serine number 2 as well. And this allows splicing proteins to come in. So splicing is what we'll talk about in the next lecture. And you already have the 5' cap. And eventually, once it's towards the end of the of elongation, once it's reaching a termination, what happens is there's a dephosphorylation of the 5' of the not 5' sorry, of the fifth serine. So initially phosphorylation of serine 5, then phosphorylation of serine 2, and then dephosphorylation of serine 5. And then you have 3' end processing proteins that are binding to the fifth serine, and these 3' end processing proteins form the poly A tail. Oh, so someone's saying the network cut off. Has the network cut off for everyone? Is it like still cut off? Because I can't say. My lag is about 130, 138 milliseconds, so that's about fine. Oh, it's okay, fine. It is on your device. Yeah, don't worry. I think the recording should be fine. So if you just look at the recording again, if you miss out some parts. Anyway, so that's how this entire process occurs. First, you have phosphorylation of serine 5, then you have phosphorylation of serine 2, and then dephosphorylation of serine 5 towards the end. And this dephosphorylation allows the 3' the poly A tail processing proteins to come in, and these proteins allow the formation of the poly A tail. But right now that's not what we're going to discuss. So this, we just talked about capping today. We'll discuss splicing and tailing in further lectures. So that's about it for today's lecture. Thank you for attending. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'll always answer them. That's about it. Thank you.